The effects of the coronavirus on the fintech industry and its customers have ranged far and wide. While the struggles that legacy companies may be facing are likely somewhat different from the difficulties that startups are dealing with, many of the issues are the same. All of these companies, for example, are grappling with what the future may bring after the coronavirus passes. This includes Ripple. As one of the largest companies in the cryptocurrency and fintech space globally, Ripple has an extensive reach around the whole world. As such, the company's leadership has a rather unique view into how the spread of the virus is changing its users' lives. Recently, finance magnates sat down with Navin Gupta, managing director of South Asia and MENA at Ripple, to talk about the effects of the coronavirus that he's observed on the industry in which his company operates, as well as about Ripple's operations and strategy in South Asia and MENA more generally. Navin became a part of Ripple after 2 years as co-founder and chief executive of an on-demand commercial transportation service firm. He also has extensive experience in global transaction banking, payments and cash management, and strategy planning after nearly 2 decades of working for HSBC and Citigroup across a number of countries. He also served as a board member of National Payments Corporation of India from 2011 to 2014. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is the Finance Magnates Blockchain Podcast. Navin, now that we're officially on the record, I just want to thank you once again for taking the time to speak with us.
Rachel, you're most welcome and pleasure to be here.
So I know who you are, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and the work that you do at Ripple? How did you get involved with Ripple?
Absolutely. So I run 2 regions. I run MENA, that's Middle East and North Africa, and I run South Asia. And without getting into designations and everything, because probably that's not useful. So I run a sending region. So if you think about Middle East, 2 large markets. UAE is the second largest sending market in the world after the US. Saudi Arabia or KSA is the third largest remittance market. And if you look at South Asia, it tends to be a very large recipient market. So if you look at India, which is the largest receiver market in the world with 71 billion US dollars. So I run both these regions. So I see the behavior of the customers who originate payments or who originate remittances and the ones that receive it. And I run it like a corridor. So if you think of world divided into number of lines, one starting from point A into point B, and there are hundreds of these lines encompassing the world, then, and what at Ripple we are trying to do is we are trying to create the network effect of originating countries and the receiving destination. So running these 2 regions give me a glimpse or give me the ecosystem in a smaller way to be able to see both the lines together. That means both the sending markets and the receiving markets in one go.
Okay, fascinating. So, and of course, Southeast Asia in particular and Asia as a whole has been identified as one of the largest, if not the largest, remittance market in the world. Can you share a little bit of information about the history of Ripple within this particular market? When did Ripple really start to identify Asia and Southeast Asia, the MENA region, as a potential place for growth, and what kind of efforts is it taking there specifically?
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. So we will go wherever our customers go. It's as simple as that, right? So if you look at just Asia in itself, and you can pick up ASEAN, you can pick up South Asia, all markets behave similarly. So firstly, they're a big deployer of workforce labor, right? So these could be Filipino nurses working globally all over the world in different countries. It could be Indian IT engineers working all over the world in different industries, right? So as labor gets deployed or as people migrate either permanently or for job reasons, they tend to send money back home to their families, right? And this tends to be a very large remittance flows. And that's the reason whole of Asia, which is the next exporter of talent or next exporter of human capital, on the reverse side, you see remittance coming back in. Right? So this is purely on the human capital side. Now let's look on goods side. So for goods, if you look at China, Malaysia, Korea, these tends to be very large countries which supply or export goods to markets around the world. And in return, they would receive US dollars or local currency back. Again, remittance market, but more in a B2B space. And then the third part tends to be services. So if you look at Indian IT firms, which probably is the biggest example of exporting codes or lines of tech, lines of code or technology overseas, and then they receive money back for the exports that they've done, which is primarily technology. So if you pick all the 3 things together, in overall, India tends to be a large exporter of goods and services or of human capital, and the rest of the world is a consumer, and hence it sends money back. So for us, it makes totally intuitive sense to make sure that we are there both on the send side and the receive side. So we are already an American company, a US company with well-developed base in US. We have two offices, both in San Francisco and New York. We are based in London. We have our office here, of course, in Dubai, in MENA, which tend to be large send markets. But equally so, we need to make sure that we need to cover the receive market. And the receive market is particular for coverage. And that's the reason you see 50% of our customers coming from receive market, because the send markets tend to be, you can see, say, more educated or more digitally alive, or greater user of technology on the send side, whereas the receive markets will tend to be underbanked or unbanked. Receive markets are the where last mile connectivity is required. Receive market is where distribution becomes quite key, maybe Philippines, maybe India, maybe Pakistan, a number of markets where we need to make sure that we put the strings of multiple customers together to be able to offer the distribution capability or the last mile connectivity capability, which our send side customers are looking for.
I see. So to that end, are most of the customers in the MENA region that Ripple has, are they mostly firms that serve like these retail customers, or is it mostly B2B?
So mainly, of course, if you look at the volume itself, the first problem that Ripple is solving, that comes from retail customers, that comes from remittances, right? Because these are individuals. You can almost multiply. If there are 10 people from X country living overseas in a send market, then every month they're sending 120 transactions, 12 into 10, right? At a minimum. And if sometimes they're sending multiple times a month, right? And so the number of transactions tend to be much, much higher. If you look at the B2B transactions, they are there, but the value is larger and the volume is smaller. And what we tend to focus on is the retail remittance market, because as you know, as per the World Bank reports, if Rachel was to send $200 to any part in Asia, she will end up spending $14 to do so. So 7% of your principal will be taken away just to make that remittance possible. So to our mind, that is because of opaque technology or old technology, no transparency in terms of the sender knowing exactly how much money will get delivered. And the whole process is error prone because it's built on 60 years old tech. And Ripple's there to change that, to make sure this 7% number becomes significantly lower and the process becomes much smoother.
Right. So to that end, then, why is, it seems like Ripple is doing a great job of serving this region. What exact elements of Ripple's technology have made Ripple so successful within MENA?
Yeah. So I would say in a technology or in a business model to be successful, there are three elements to it. So firstly, your tech needs to be solid, right? So if Rachel buys Ripple's platform, Ripple's technology, she should have great experience. It should work exactly the way it is promised, right? And that is what our customers are experiencing. When they experience the Ripple tech, they say, hey, you know what? Wow, this is great. It's like Rachel using the first telephone. She picks up, she speaks to Navin, and she says, yeah, I mean, this is amazing, right? I was writing letters earlier, and now I'm able to speak to someone, right? But there is one more big element to it, which is the network, right? A telephone is only as good as the number of people having the telephone, and the effect is not linear. The effect is in a step change. That means now that we have 300 customers who are using exactly the same tech, now people can connect with each other a lot more easily. So a WhatsApp or a telephone becomes much more valuable because of the network effect it brings itself. So Ripple is already in the second phase where the tech is already proven, and now we are building the network. And hence, it's very important for us to make sure that we focus on having customers in every single receive market around the world, and we make sure that we cover every product type in which the beneficiary wants to receive money. Some beneficiaries wants to receive money in their wallet, some in their bank account, some cash, some through multiple other mechanisms through a post office. And we need to make sure that we offer those diversity of options that suits the last mile beneficiary as much as possible, right? So now we are building both the network and then clearly the diversity within the network within the same country. Like in Philippines, we can do accounts, we can do cash, and we can offer credits to wallets as well. And then the last thing that I would say is, and this will be a topic that we'll discuss a couple of years later, is interconnectivity between the networks. What we also want to make sure is not only we connect and bring money back in a country, but we also connect to the local rails in that particular country. So for example, as you know, there is instant local rails in most countries around the world, or bigger markets around the world. In UK, they have FPS, faster payment system. In India, they have IMPS. In both in Hong Kong and Singapore, they have faster payments already. What we're doing is we're also connecting then to the domestic networks to ensure every single bank account, every single wallet gets covered through that.
Right. So is that sort of the way that Ripple is in MENA is working on expanding right now by building out the network connectivity and also making sure that there's these options in these received markets? Is that the primary strategy for expansion right now, or is there more to that?
So that's the primary strategy, right? So for us to build the network, and then within the network, we are offering optionality. So let's take an example. Let's assume Rachel uses a company, let's call it TransferGo, because TransferGo is one of our customers, right? She uses TransferGo to send money into India. So today she has the choice of converting her euros into US dollars, and US dollars get converted into INR, and that's how money comes into India. But what we are also offering TransferGo the optionality to use our digital asset, which is XRP. So the money, the euro gets converted into XRP, and XRP gets converted into Indian rupees. Indian rupees is not a good example because it's not live as yet, but Philippines is live. So it will be, for example, from euros into XRP into Philippines peso, and with which you are able to get in, of course, money delivered instantly to a beneficiary in Philippines, but also at a much lower cost than it would have been in the traditional channel. So through on-demand liquidity, we are offering optionality to TransferGo to lower their costs as they send money into Philippines, because now they don't need to have a Nostro account or a cash position in Philippines to make this transactions happen. And as the cost of liquidity for our customers get reduced, we know some of those costs and the benefits will get passed on to the consumers or to the users as well.
Okay. So if I'm, an end user somewhere in the MENA region, and I'm using one of Ripple's services, how does that improve my life on a concrete level? Like, what are the exact benefits of using Ripple in MENA?
Absolutely, right. So first of all, for you, the interface still stays the same. So for example, if you're a customer of Rack Bank is a customer of us, they have a regional bank in the UAE. You will continue to be their customer. So you will either be an account holder or you would be a wallet holder, whereby you are able to walk into their branches or able to use any of the digital apps to make the transaction exactly the way it would be that you would do in the BAU manner. Now, because they're using Ripple at the background, the first thing that is going to happen is the moment you enter the details, we are able to pre-validate those details with the Bene bank. So the information goes to the beneficiary bank and it comes back to say, hey, Rachel wants to send money to Navin, and Navin's account number is correct, name is correct. We have done all the AML checks and this transaction can go through. So even before Rachel's account gets debited, there is pre-validation that happens so that it's not post the fact that somebody comes back to you to say, hey, you gave a wrong name or a wrong number. You would know that upfront. The second thing is very transparently, you will be able to see that for your 100 AED, what will be the actual amount in rupees that will get delivered. That will include the FX rate, that will include any fee both the sending and the receiving banks would charge, and the net amount in Indian rupees that will get delivered into that particular account. If you like it, great. If you don't, then you can say, hey, you know what, I don't want to do this transaction. But let's assume you decide that you would go ahead with the transaction. The moment you press enter, there will be a debit to your account and there will be a credit to a corresponding account in India in a few seconds, right? And the transaction is finished because now you have a transaction that's error-free, that's instant, and that gives you 100% transparency for the actual amount that gets delivered, and you get an acknowledgement and then you go home. So this is the user experience that we are delivering to Rachel today with our customers who are on Ripple versus who are not, where it will take 2 days, a lot of time there'll be errors, you will not know what FX rate or the exact amount that will get delivered to the beneficiary. And lots of time, in absence of that information, the sender feels cheated to say, hey, you know what, nobody tells me what amount will get delivered. I have no idea whether a fair exchange rate was charged to me or not.
Right, and that's obviously a huge problem. What are the are you focused on developing the Ripple services in any particular jurisdiction right now, or is it sort of a sweeping strategy over the whole MENA region?
So for us, the key thing is to get scale, right? So, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that, right? So we have a lot of senders in the MENA region already. For example, the largest bank in Saudi, its name is Al Raji Bank, is a customer of ours, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of customers on the send side, but a recent customer of us on the receive side is a company called Bcash. You may have looked at them. They are funded by IFC and among the top World Bank organizations around the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what Bcash does is, so if you look at a country like Bangladesh, about 50% of the people above 15 years of age are unbanked, right? And what Bcash does is it has got 36 million, you can call them wallet holder. And primarily what Bcash used to do for past many years, it used to do domestic remittances. That means Rachel, if she's a Bangladeshi citizen, she could send money from a local mom and pop store, which can be received in cash by another person in the hinterland from another local mom and pop store. So they essentially
Okay.
had these millions of outlets connected together through Bcash technology for making domestic remittances back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to give you a sense, they have got 36 million customers, and the total number of bank customers in Bangladesh would be less than 25% of that number, right? So in terms of the scale, so they're about 3 to 4 times bigger than the banked population, right? And now what we are doing is through a bank in Bangladesh, we are connecting the Bcash network to the remittance network overseas. As you know, there are millions of Bangladeshi workers work in Saudi, work in UAE, in a lot of jobs, construction, IT, retail, and these people, they send money back home. But earlier they had a hindrance of sending money back home because there was no distribution channel in the small village where they needed to deliver that money. Now,
Oh.
through a bank in Bangladesh, which is connected to the Bcash ecosystem, we are able to deliver to any of these 36 million customers almost instantly where they can receive cash in the smallest of villages in Bangladesh. So this is the kind of change that we are bringing to say, hey, you know what? The sender always has multiple options. And of course, we are improving the options for the sender as well. But really, the key work is being done on the receiver side to make sure that those domestic networks, which earlier used to serve domestic population, we are able to connect into them and be able to do international remittances through the same networks itself.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. So I want to ask you, about the regulatory challenges that you might have faced in the MENA region. What have those challenges been, and what has your strategy been to sort of overcome them?
Yeah. So first of all, in the Ripple, our DNA is very clear. We believe for any technology or for Ripple to become mainstream, we need to work with the regulators. We need to earn the trust of the regulators, explain to them what we are doing, why we are doing it, and what is the benefit to the constituents. And once they understand it, then they work very closely with us alongside, right? And Sama is one good example where Ripple and Sama work very closely in the initial part when we were putting the technology together. And what Sama said, hey, you know what? Rather than experimenting one bank by one bank, why don't I get a group of banks together and let all of them pilot the Ripple platform, and assuming that Ripple is successful or it's a failure, let them very openly discuss and learn from each other. And that way you can get scale in Saudi Arabia much more quickly, and the banks can get benefit of adopting a technology much more quickly. So we work very closely with Sama, and we took a number of banks on board, and that's the reason in Saudi, for example, we are very, very successful. So our first aim is to work with the regulators, educate them, understand what their concerns are, address their concerns, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then make sure that the technology is being used at scale in a very, very transparent manner. And because banks are regulated institutions, they are already being regulated by the government. The governments and central banks feel very comfortable when banks are involved. And we personally believe this is the way we are able to bring technology mainstream. And that's the reason you would see, even for our ODL solution, which is on-demand liquidity, which uses a digital asset, we work in markets where the digital exchanges have been, or there is a regulatory framework in place which allows digital exchanges to function. So, for example, in Philippines, in Mexico, in a number of markets around the world. So we always work with the regulators, one, on education, right?
Okay. Right.
Then second, making sure that we stay between the letter and the spirit of the regulation. And then the
Right.
last is that we bring the benefits to their citizens very, very directly to them to say, hey, this is how your citizens are benefiting. And once we do that, then we find a huge amount of support. So we don't go by the backside. We don't do anything that is unregulated, but we work within the system and closely with the regulators.
Okay, yeah, and I want to ask you specifically about India. You know, given the fact that there was recently a Supreme Court decision to overturn the ban on banks working with blockchain firms, has that influenced Ripple at all? I mean, has that changed anything about the way that Ripple has been allowed to operate in India, or if not on that level, has it changed the way that Ripple is planning on developing itself in India?
Yeah. So just to make sure I address this correctly, so we are already live in India with a number of banks, right?
Yes.
And the solution that we are live with doesn't use any cryptos, right? So for example, TransferGo is an existing customer of Ripple, which sends remittances into India. But of course, there is no use of digital asset. And what we have done is we convert a GBP paying customer into TransferGo, into US dollars, into INR, and deliver money instantly 24/7, 365 days a year. In fact, sometimes on London buses, you would see ads runs on Ripple and lot of TransferGo, all of TransferGo's technology, when a remittance is sent into India runs on Ripple. Right? So that part is already live. The part that is not live or that we are advocating for is the use of XRP or cryptocurrency or digital asset as a bridge, right? And for that to be enabled, there needs to be a licensing framework for cryptocurrency exchanges or digital asset exchanges in that particular country. So our advocacy or our work in India is for the Indian government to view this as a positive, look at it as an innovation, and look at what Mexico has done, Japan has done, Philippines has done, and how their ecosystem are benefiting. Because at the end of the day, India is the largest receive market in the world, which receives 71 billion US dollars. And if cryptocurrency exchanges were to exist and the use case would be remittances, then it will be a huge benefit to Indian citizens or Indian diaspora, which is living overseas. But like I said, we are not in a hurry. We are working with the regulators, bringing to them facts, figures, experiences from other markets, and then let them make the best choice for their own citizens. So it is a journey, and we are, of course, working with everyone to make sure that the benefits are well understood.
Right. Okay. Navin, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you a little bit about this pandemic that we're both currently experiencing. What have, how has this affected, if it has affected indeed the business that Ripple is doing in the MENA region, or what have you observed in the ways that people are perhaps using Ripple now as compared to 2 months ago?
True. So two things we can observe very, very like a dramatic shift, right? So one is we are seeing a big shift from paper or touch-based or physical to digital, right? So if Rachel today had the choice, then she would not like to go to a physical retail store. If she can use her app to make the transfer possible, she would like to do that, right?
Right.
So there is a shift in terms of our customers who have very strong digital footprint, who are digital first banks or payment companies. And what we are seeing is definitely their business is going up, and clearly this shift to digital is definitely happening, and it has been accelerated by this particular crisis, right? And then the second thing that we are seeing is on the beneficiary side as well, a similar shift that is happening, right? So on the beneficiary side, earlier people may have had the ability to go and line up, or people may have the ability to receive cash from XYZ places. But today, due to lockdown in multiple countries around the world, we are also seeing payments into bank accounts, or payments into wallets, or payment into some kind of an electronic mean through which then the beneficiary family can go ahead and send it, right? So what we're seeing is this from touch to no touch, from physical to digital, or from cash to digital. And this is across, we are seeing both in sending and receiving markets, right? And this I say with all human concern for everything that's going on. And here I'm just talking about the transaction, of course, assuming that this is assuming that this is going to continue for a few months. Some of that shift, I think, will be permanent because first time getting somebody educated to use digital always takes a little bit of time, and there is a behavior pattern. But once people use it, then a lot of it essentially stays, and then people continue to be digital from there on.
Right. So the shift to physical, from physical to digital is going to perhaps stay after the pandemic leaves. Do you see any other, permanent changes coming out of the financial sector for now, or do you think that just remains to be seen at this point?
So Rachel, it really depends on how long it lasts, right?
Okay.
So if I had a crystal ball, or if I could pray, I would wish this away almost immediately.
Yeah.
So I think all governments are, and all societies and citizens are in a, you can call it a fear mode, right? And I think depending upon how long it lasts, different governments, different citizens, and different habits would form depending on that.
Absolutely. Navin, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.